So we're none too pleased with Guild for their built-in obsolescence and their investment in soft screws for some reason. Now this here also has a minor electrical fault. The way I roll up my cord thusly has ended up in the wires there fraying, and just so it would get hot and you could smell it, and those intermittent faults, and if you know what you're doing, you spot them. But I like to wrap it up like that because it doesn't put kinks into the wire itself. You don't get wraps, but obviously that is a weak point. So yeah, let's see if it'll fire up for a demo. Nope. See the spark. So that's the problem. The only problem is here, localized. So chop it off, move it up, put the sleeve back on. So this is a Challenge, I believe. Not even branded. Very good. I think it came from the Challenge family. Argos's cheapest brands. Tidy little drill. Look at this. The cheapest screws on the market, you know, made. Oh, spend a wee bit actually. Might have to take this back. To blame oneself is a sign of progress. This is a perfectly fine drill. This is fancier and costs more. So the chassis and so on, unnecessary engineering, unnecessary plastic use, unnecessary specialized plastic for a certain feel, and the place to invest really. Well, you know, the motor is the most important thing at the end of the day. So many products like this are basically just a motor and a housing, and coupling those two things together is tricky. So actually doing electrical stuff is handy, but building things into a casing, for me personally, is much more of a challenge. It takes much more time. Okay. Yeah, that's all right then. Not an electrical switch. No springy things. They're going to go pop. Ooh, how much of this do I want to mess with? Not as little as possible, I suppose. Yeah, it's all getting very exciting in there. All right then, sticking to this side, are you? Fair enough. Let's have a little look at the innards of this drill. So, here's our power coming in, goes into the switching unit. This thing is transferred into these two things, which are the brushes, which can get burnt out. And that goes into the commutator. And then that puts current into this bad boy, which spins. Well, actually, the inside of this stays stationary and is therefore called a stator, and has the coils. And then this bit in here spins along with the commutator, because on the same shaft. And then that turns the drill head much more slowly. So that spins fast. And you can change torque settings, but you just can make it up with gears and blah de blah. Who knows? At the end of the day, just focus on the power. But I do think this is actually a variable switch as well. It adjusts the speed. For all the price of it, I still have been using this as a cordless screwdriver for you know, years. So, and also mixing concrete with it, which was, you know, fine. This is going to be a pain in the arse to fix, so they're just jammed in like arseholes. We can't just screw into a wee block. But yeah, you can see this is a bit like the human body. You don't have much spare capacity. Everything's packed in really dense. I remember a medical student talking to me about that. I guess they're working with cadavers. And they were saying about how your heart and your lungs and your liver and your stomach and your intestines and your spleen and your kidneys and your bladder and, you know, various reproductive organs, they're all just like stuck around. And yeah, this is similar because, you don't want to waste space, don't want to waste materials. Small is beautiful or something. But I want to get this switch fixed. When I say fixed, I don't mean in an Al Pacino kind of way. So it wasn't necessary to remove this face. The two exposed screws actually were the terminals that go into. So neutral up here and live down here. And I guess it can make sense because be careful when taking out wires. Even take pictures before you take them out because, oh well, if you're an absent-minded fool like me. So you can see here that the neutral has lots going on over there in the neutral. And once you connect the neutral, it's connected. But down here is a live, which is permanently disconnected unless that latch switch does something. And then it's a 2-speed. And then once that first switch is done, that connects one thing. And then maybe when you push that second one, yes, push that second one, it engages a different thing. So I guess that turns on one coil on the right-hand brass bit that runs up. And then that second push connects up that, which will probably be a second coil to give it twice as much torque. So yeah, it's variable speed, but not continual. So it's got two settings. Then it's got this plus minus at the front. What do you reckon it does? Do you reckon this is there for good measure? Do you reckon it just turns it on? So that probably adjusts this thing back and forward, which then adjusts this thing, which then adjusts when it kicks in, which is a bit ridiculous. I don't know. Just means you have to squeeze it further, I suppose, before it gives it everything. What is it? Some Star Trek reference. But anyway, so that latch is down. Power goes to here. Goes further back. This latch is up. Now we have two powers. So double the power or whatever. Whatever the winding is in the motor. I only see two windings on the outside. I can see two neutrals. I think the black would be doing something. How does your current run? So, yeah, it just runs through the blue wires. Interesting. So yeah, when that first one goes on, whenever this first one goes on, power runs up through here, through this, which is probably some sort of resistor, I guess. Microfarads, eh? Not a capacitor. Suppose it could be. So it runs through that anyway. Yeah, it probably passes through a load of current. Maybe that's what it's doing. Anyway, not to worry. But the first latch puts the current through an impedance, and then the second latch bypasses the impedance. And once we're onto the motor side, both sides are just as live as the other, I think is the theory, which is why they're both running blue. You could run both of them in brown or something, but whatever. Usually you do something like this after a transformer, because still at this point, if you touch one wire, it'd give you a shock. If you touch the other one, it won't. So, when it's not running. Anyway, that's a rabbit hole. Now the reassemblage. Put this back in with delicate little fat fingers. So it is handy having big fat fingers for, like, shoveling logs around. But you need to respect, like, actual fine delicacy. Some of it does boil down to your sort of raw makeup. Certain things are easier, certain things are harder. We all work together to make something great. So if one were a more detail-oriented kind of observer or human being, I might have looked at this more better. And this here is a circuit diagram. So we have some diodes going on and a switch, and then we also have a capacitor. So there's a capacitor there with a switch at it, and then you've also got the diodes. So are the diodes the motor? I don't think so. Anyway, it's a bit confusing. There's one switch, and maybe that's the second switch on board. Oh yeah, no, switch 1, switch 2. Yeah, switch 2 switches out the diode. Yeah, fair enough. Switch 1 switches in the capacitor. Yeah, let's just accept it. On another detail-oriented thing, this is the type of thing I pick up on better, if we will. The difference between the screws out of the two machines. So black and, you know, shiny, you can see already the luster wearing off, the softness of this metal. But they're like functionally identical screws. I guarantee that this one costs like half to a tenth of the cost of the black one, just because it's so bog standard and basic. But it's better. It comes out of your tool, so you can repair it. If you want to find a risque commentary in there, work away. So here's a lesson. Because I didn't get this, or took that off and didn't transport it across, I have to undo everything I've done. So basically I'm in the equivalent position I was in about half an hour ago when I started to fix this. But now I know what to do, and I won't spend so much time waffling about what I'm looking at. But it's an interesting thing. Do something once, you should probably do it twice. If you don't actually remember it, probably do it 3 times in a row. If it's getting boring and you know what you're doing, then you know that's really where you want to be at. But here we are, round 2. So there's an interesting discussion topic point people in the repair community make, and it basically argues that if you can't repair something, you don't own it. And it always sort of sounds a bit funny. I never really took it on board, even though it'd be part of their target demographic. But it is fair. This I owned on a service contract. I never realized this is something I can fix. And I can open it up, I can look at it and go, everything's in the right place. Nobody's messing around. We'll get on with it. It's not fancy, it's not a DeWalt. You know, but DeWalt's could be made to a, you know, similar deconstruction, reconstruction thing. I guess it's somewhat more respected in the gun field that you can disassemble a weapon and put it back together. But these are toys. Some of these are toys, some of them are weapons, some of them are tools. A lot of them are a mixture of all three. So, but some are potentially more cynically made than others. But you can see why you can pay someone to do a job like this, and it can seem like a lot of money until you try and do it yourself, and then you realize, yeah, it takes them 5 minutes, but it might have taken you 50. And if you'd taken 50 minutes, then you could do it yourself another time for someone else. But do you really want to? And if you would want to, how much would you charge for it? So it's not nothing. It's also worth noting, these tools aren't cheap. I mean, they're cheap tools, but they still add up. So you end up with like 50 quid's worth of tools to fix like a 20 quid drill. But you know, some of us need to have these tools. Some of us like playing with them. So, you know, so long as it's for the benefit of everybody, you can't call us a bunch of wankers. You fix things for other people, and they aren't really going to appreciate it. You can end up in a similar bind as the whole consume nonsense. Alright, how'd you flip out? There is a whole interesting thing around transferable skills as well, of course. Do be careful on your second run round. Don't become complacent, you know. This is what's known in trade as a suicide lead, I believe. So, not that it's recommended. But mental health is a big deal in our society. And to be honest, I wouldn't say I advocate this for mental health. I think it was, for me, a salvation at a time, and even still. This time around, I can take the opportunity just to make sure that things aren't off to the side slightly. Last time I noticed that the live was slightly bundled to one side. It was fine. Wasn't going to put under any strain, not going to shake loose. I just would have preferred better. Whereas this time, I can take the moments to appreciate it. Yeah, the previous time, I basically brought it all the way down from the top, like a hammer action. This time it's sort of sliding under. There's not so much of the old twisting going on. Should pause and think, anything else I'm missing? Pretty sure there isn't, but it wouldn't be the first time I'd overlooked something. Alright, tighten them up, give them a tug. Is that I don't know if that's sexual innuendo as well. Does it really matter anymore? Who even cares? Not I, says a fox. You only have to get it right once. It's a bit different that from you have to get it right first time. It's a very different challenge. So, nestle this one up, and then there's something around the switch that just went snap and everything was lovely. We didn't have any problems at all. Somewhat premature. Not even the cold light of dawn, just a false dawn. Just a false dawn. Whatever that would have been. What do you reckon false dawn was? Like the moon coming up or something? When I worked in a small engineering company, I always figured that commissioning was like kind of just a little tax you added on the end for yourself. You know, leave it a change in the back pocket. But nah, commissioning is important. You want those guys to be well trained. You want to have done it before. You want them to have done it recently. It should be a tick sheet. It should be boring. It should look boring. But yeah, there's a lot to be said for boring. No pun intended. So let's find out. One. Oh. One, two, three. Seems to have 3 settings, but this thing does a fucking trick, like. So we can consider what we've done. We, as in the royal we, chose to fix a cheap drill. So if we hadn't have fixed it, it had have gone into, you know, the rubbish, of which there is plenty, then it would just add to like the pile of rubbish and bit of plastic and metal and, you know, all these little, just all that stuff. Detritus. Fry taught us about it in Futurama. Anyway, so we fixed the drill, saved it from the rubbish, saved getting another one. I think there's plenty of life left in this. It does what it needs to do. So I could have bought another one. And honestly, I might have got an upgrade. I'd have bought an upgrade, bought this piece of shit. You know, might have packed in twice as quick. And then when I go to fix it, can't fix it because screw failure. I mean, honestly, if all the things that you want to fail on, soft screws are not one of them. And that maybe possibly is like a pun or a joke right there. But yeah, fuck that shit. And also, come to know our tool a little bit better as well and ask more questions about it and appreciate it. So, and if also you need to do something similar, the next time it'll take half as long, really, to open it up and pop it out. So, Jesus, awful minds. Anything else we learned? We had fun. We had fun. Night time. Go home. Go to bed. Hypothetically.